Welcome to Makers International, a podcast of makers, connecting with makers from all around the world. Here's your hosts, Jamie Page, Chris Cute, and now, Richard Morley.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good times, whatever time it is, wherever you are listening. Joined with me, as always, Mr. Chris Cute.
Cheers. How are you?
And talking of train wrecks, it's Mr. Jamie Page.
I'm cleanly shaved.
Do you know what? I've got to have a shave later, actually, because of wearing a mask at work. It's starting to get a bit itchy. So,
I think it's the first episode ever that you're the only one with more facial hair than all of us
put together.
Put together.
Absolutely. Yeah, for those of you listening to this podcast later on just the audio version, that's probably best.
This is about as riveting as it's gonna get. So let's just
yes. So thanks for joining us. What have you? Shall I run through the sponsors? I think we need to because we had a little quick shout out for Steve. So as always, because I remembered, tonight's show is brought to you in part by Yorkshire Grit, the Wood Turners Abrasive Paste, our good friend Chad at Mancrafting, Pam from Highland Boxes, and also Steve at Harneal Media, who sorts out all the website, etc. Makes sure that Jamie takes a bit of credit for his hard work, putting all the sponsors' information on there. If you want to find out about the sponsors, then please do head on over to the website, makersinternationalpodcast.com/sponsors, and I'm sure Jamie will pretend that he's put all the information on there. Thanks, Steve. And hopefully Steve is feeling a lot better, because I know he was a bit poorly during the week, wasn't he? So,
yes, unfortunately, Steve had a little bit of a mishap. He had a heart attack. I'll get to that when we get to my little segment at the end. I won't say it because it'll ruin everything for you. I won't want to put you through that torture.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was jump. I was, if I'm going to jump on your toes, Jamie, I'll actually jump on your toes. But I just thought it was a good time just to say, get well. I know he's been a bit poorly, and I wasn't really going to go into any more depth than that because it's
well, there is a little bit more information to be said on that matter, but I'll get to that a little bit later on in the show.
Okay,
all right,
cool.
Awesome,
good stuff. So
we wish him well.
What? Yeah, absolutely, as we wish everyone well, unless you're horrible, in which case we just wish you weren't, and then we could wish you well. So
Yeah.
You can talk about you after you're gone.
Well, yeah, absolutely. What have you guys been up to this week? Because I've been mental busy doing we basically haven't spoken. We sort of at least have a little chat and find out what's going on, or at least what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, I'll let Jamie go after me because Jamie had a bigger week than I did. My week entailed finally getting my entire shop cleaned out.
That's huge news, Chris. That's like.
Finally getting everything taken out. It hasn't. No, I haven't made it spotless yet to the point where I'd like to get out there and do things. But the cardboard boxes are gone. The BS is gone. I mean, I've just got some spot work to do, and then I'm going to be good to go. So my week was basically essentially out there doing that.
Were you just getting rid of the cardboard boxes? Or be honest now, or were you using those enormous cardboard boxes to put all the stuff in that had accumulated?
No. Actually, I did the proper thing. I actually broke them all down and put them in the recycle bin, and the man came by and took them. But there was there was a lot of them. Oh my God! And wow. I was actually on Facebook earlier this week, and I saw somebody who put a meme up that said, "You're old when you can't decide whether to throw away a cardboard box or not because." Hey, look! It's a pretty nice box, It's like, and I just I laughed at that because I had no problem tearing apart these boxes and getting them the heck out of my way. So, yeah. I mean,
so I don't know if this is as relevant for you, Chris, because I think you get mostly your groceries in paper bags, don't you, in the States? So that's like
we actually use bags that we tote back and forth each week that we have. I mean, we're kind of the green aspect of we don't do
bags for life.
Yeah, we have the bags for life here in the UK, but before those we just used to get like plastic carrier bags, and
so do we.
Everyone's mum had the good carrier bags because they were the carrier bags your mum would keep carrier bags in. So it's a very, very similar sort of situation.
Yeah. Well, it's equivalent to the good cardboard box. Come on, that's a good box. I mean, I might want to that. No.
just as a sort of a measure of how old Chris might actually be.
Oh, come on. Do we really need to go there?
Do you save sticks specifically because they might be useful for stirring paint?
Sticks.
Yeah. Do you have like you go, oh, I'll keep that stick because that'd be useful for stirring paint. Or
I do.
That's
I do.
old. You heard it here first.
I do. I do. Because I go through my scrap wood and I go look at that and go, I could use that to stir something with in the future. And I have you suck, Richard, because I have like a bundle about like this big.
Gotcha.
with a rubber band around them. And it's like, you use them once, you stir, then you throw them. I hate you. Anyway, Jamie,
awesome.
Please take this off me. You had a pretty cool week, my friend. What's going on with you?
What have I been doing this week? So I've actually started doing some live shows. So Easywood Tools and Carl Jacobson hosted a live event this Saturday, just gone, or yesterday, and a few makers basically did a day of making, whether it was turning, spoon carving, opal inlay, resin stuff, and all that kind of stuff. And they asked me to be part of it. I accepted. So yeah, I did an hour of making on a live show. It was some good fun. And evidently, I asked in the live show if people wanted me to do more lives, and the answer was overwhelmingly yes. So
nice.
I guess there's some live shows going to be coming up in the future for my channel, I suppose.
That's cool, and that should kind of build. I don't want to say build your confidence, because that could come across a bit patronising, and I totally don't mean that. But when you were at like Kempton Park and you did your sort of actual live in a real place with real people there with you, if you get into that kind of, I guess, rhythm or zone or whatever you call it at home, so that will really help on those.
So what it was kind of when I was doing the Kempton Park ones live in front of everybody else, it's really, really nerve-wracking. And one of the things that actually kind of helped really was the fact that Dave Gunner was there. And it's funny enough because Dave was actually in the audience hurling abuse at me.
If I'd have been there, I probably would as well. So thanks, Dave.
It kind of relaxed me. And for my first ever live demo, Dave trolling and hurling abuse at me in the audience, and it relaxed me. So the second day and the third day, I was perfectly fine. And then the year afterwards, because I just remembered what Dave was doing, I was perfectly fine after that. So when it came to the live, I had Dale and Wayne in my ear, and I was expecting around 200 to 300 people on the live, because that's roughly what everybody else was getting before. And plus I was following Anne of All Trades on my live, and obviously she's quite a big channel. I think she had like 160,000 subscribers, something around that ballpark.
Yeah.
So I was expecting quite a few people, and so yeah, all of a sudden, like I'm going around, and Dale was like, "Well, how about you like feel a bit nervous?" And Dale was like, "Well, how's this for you?" And all of a sudden, he pulls out this number, and I'm like, so yeah, and all of a sudden, I'm like, so all of a sudden, Dale's and the number's just rising and rising and rising. So I think most people topped around 300 sort of people, and I think I topped out at like 630.
Nice.
Sort of good. So I basically doubled everybody else.
And what kind of friend would Dale be if he didn't make you nervous by telling you an instant count every 15 seconds?
That's exactly what I said. I think Carl had around 500 on his first one, according to Carl. But yeah.
Yeah, don't get nervous right now, Jimmy. But there's 4,000 people watching. It's like, oh, thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dale.
That's exactly what I said. I said, who needs enemies when you got friends like Dale?
What an ass.
So, but for my second live, I mean, it was one of them things. It's just I couldn't believe that there was that much support in there, and yeah, it was great. It was good to see, good to be part of. Yeah, it's awesome. So
nice.
Yeah, what about you, Chris?
Well, I already told you what I've been doing, but Richard, what about you, man?
Well, I've been working all week long. I've been doing these sash windows last week. I think I mentioned it. Well, the week before last, because I think I mentioned it last week briefly. And then at the start of the week, I had a phone call from the NHS agency with the shifts. They finally got some shifts for us to start up. So we went off, did our induction, and I had 3 early morning shifts at the local hospital, which is it's only like a small cottage hospital. I think I don't actually know how many patients there are, but less than 50 patients. So it's not like a massive thing, but there's lots of different kind of clinics and offices and different departments. So there's a lot of people scattered around this site. And because I was in the middle of a big client job, I didn't want to just stop it, and I didn't want to turn down the shifts because you don't know when more are going to happen. So I was getting up at when it was still dark, and in the summertime it gets light pretty early. So we were getting up super early, then do a 7-hour shift at the hospital, just doing a bit of portering, so like just general dog's body basically, nothing too exciting, and then finishing, having a quick bite to lunch, and driving off to the client's job. So yeah, a member of staff rocking up in a little van packed full of tools and leaving it in the car park on the hospital. It was a bit nerve-wracking on the first day, but it's not too bad. Absolutely exhausted though, because I wasn't finishing until like 8 or 9 when it started getting dark, and then you do that all week, it starts to take its toll. So I feel like I've done about 300 million hours in the last week, and my body's like, stop, don't do that again, don't do it. So yeah, if I fall asleep, I apologise.
So you're basically doing you're working 2 jobs for the last week.
Basically, yeah. And just the amount of walking though. I mean, I've got my steps in. If anyone out there is counting their steps, I was doing like 17,000 steps just in the first job, and then going off and doing my own. So then up and down ladders and all the rest. So yeah, I'm literally exhausted. Just my feet are killing me.
Wow.
But it's got to be done. So no point moaning about it or feeling kind of sorry for yourself. You just got to get on and do what you got to do, haven't you? So yeah,
get it done with.
I'll tell you what. The hardest thing was being organised, because I'd have to sort out what tools I needed for work, and then get them ready to load on the van, because I'd leave my van empty overnight, and then load it in the morning, having not forgotten everything. Go to work, then go to another job, and have no way of have to remember what I've packed. So literally, I just packed everything just in case. So
wow.
I've got tools everywhere, just everything. Just pack the lot just in case, and then you only use half of it, and you're like, oh no, I've got to unpack it all because I don't want to leave it in the van overnight. So it takes forever to load and then forever to unload. So yeah, that kind of brings us into what I think. What I hope we're now talking about, because I've gone on about it for so long, is power tools, like favourite power tools that we have, and what we what we like and what we don't like, and all the rest of it.
I think just about. My cat is crying. Wish that cat would shut up. Anyway, do you hear it? Anyway,
Feed me. I'm hungry. Let me out. Let me back in.
That's not exactly what she's asking for, but okay. Power tools. Not every craft uses power tools. Let's just be honest, because some like artists, for instance, they use canvas and they use a brush. So there's, of course you could probably do an airbrush thing there, and there would be power tools involved with that. But most of the traditional artists, they don't use any sort of power tools. So there's some crafts, some skills are excluded from this, but there are others that there is leather working, there is metal working, there is woodworking. I mean, we all incorporate. I don't want to say all, because there are those hand tool only kind of people out there, and that and that's fine. If you get happiness out of only using hand tools, and God love you, I just don't have the patience to do it. But most of us use power tools to some extent within our workshop today. And so we had some questions, and
Were they from Andy? Andy always keeps
Well,
us
of
well-fed
course
with
they're from
questions.
Andy. And Andy's first question is obvious, and I will answer it because the rest of you, I know, are going to agree with me. His first question was, what power tools do not have a hand tool predecessor? And my answer to that is basically there are no power tools that don't have a hand tool predecessor. Period. There just aren't. I mean, you can break it down all the way that you want to. From a CNC, you're looking at a router moving down to a chisel. I mean, down. Jamie and I were talking about this, down to a rock. I mean, there are. I mean, hand tools, power tools are a progression of the hand tool work that used to be done, eons ago. So
and
there are none.
Hand tools are an upgrade from a rock.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. How many power tools are not used to their fullest extent? Is his next
Router.
question.
It's funny you say that because I'd say a scroll saw.
I reckon probably everything, because you think about any tool. I mean, like, think of a table saw. Just take a table saw. Like, before Izzy started putting videos out, I would never have thought about half the things that Izzy uses there. And I think it's just down to your kind of imagination and just how kind of ballsy you are at sometimes, just to go, might not be the best thing, but I've got it and I'll give it a go and we'll see how we get on.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So I think pretty much all tools could be sort of pushed a bit within reason. It depends how daring you feel.
It is a good question since Richard said table saw. I wonder how many people have gone back and made some of Izzy's old plans since the saw stop came out.
I don't know. I never made any of Izzy's so-called plans. I made one of his jigs, and it's a joke between he and I to this day, because I constantly bitch at him about this because he pissed me off about it. He built this because at the time I was building some rustic furniture and I was trying to mill down some, relatively short logs, and I needed to get a flat edge on one. And at that point in time, I didn't actually have a bandsaw at that point in time. I was in between the old bandsaw that had died and the new bandsaw that was coming in, and I needed a way to mill a flat sided one. And he put out a jig that showed you how to cut like tree branches, basically. I mean, we're talking like 4, maybe 5 inches around in circumference, down and get a flat side on them so that you could then finish the milling work on the table saw. And he never explained how to make the jig. He just put a video up showing the jig that he made. He never explained it, didn't do anything. And so I must have watched that video like 20 times in order to go, what did he do? Okay, I get it. Sliding dovetail. Okay, this. And I finally figured it out. And then I used it. And then about 6 months later, he puts out a video explaining exactly how to make that damn thing. I was like, oh, you suck. You know how much time I spent trying to figure out how to make that friggin' thing, and now you're going to tell me? You could have done that the week after, Izzy. And he just started, Izzy's a good guy. He just started chuckling. He's like, yeah, well, sorry, Chris. I was like, well, it's all right. I got the information. It just took me a little longer than other people had to wait.
And I think that's probably happened literally millions of times. You think you come up with something and somebody else is almost at the same time concurrently thinking of the same thing. It's just that now with things like YouTube, you know about it, or you find out about it. So who was it? Was it Dale? I think somebody said in the comments, the power tool that's least most underutilized, a shop vac. I think we can all relate to that.
A shop vac, yeah. Yeah, well, good. Yeah,
I've got a shop window.
Actually, well, I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of that, but I'm less guilty than some people I know. Trust me, I've been in some shops. I tend to clean up when I'm done.
My shop vac's in the shed.
Yeah.
For instance, Jamie may not be quite, but I usually, I use it for dust extraction when I can, and then when I'm done for the day, I mean, honestly, I go around and clean up my tools and stuff and try to make it proper for the next day. But yeah, shop vac would be one that's probably good. All right, here's a question. And Andy has another one. and I've got an answer for this up front, but if you guys want to stray from mine, feel free, obviously. Which power tool would you recommend to a new person, somebody who's new to the craft? And he has a lot of variables in there, and he even says with the variables he throws in there, this may be an impossible answer to actually, possible question to actually answer, but I'll take it at its face value, Andy. Andy, in the woodworking world, I think there are 3 power tools that every beginner should begin with, because you can virtually make anything you want using these 3 tools, and they are hand power tools, a circular saw, or a skill saw, whichever. I don't know what the pronunciation is or what the description is in your locale, but a skill saw is basically the handheld table saw. A jigsaw is the handheld bandsaw, and a power drill. A drill, a skill saw, and a jigsaw, and you can make pretty much anything you want. And I'm not going to say it's easy, because you have to be really good and skilled at using those tools in order to turn out a great product. But I'm telling you, you can absolutely build anything in the world using those 3 tools if that's the way you want to go. And if that's all the money you have to spend, then you can probably get it done. The only thing you can't do with that, and Jamie may even have an objection to this, because if you have a strong power drill, you can actually build a jig and make a lathe out of a drill. But your but your RPMs are going to be really low compared to what a regular lathe would do. So I mean, but you can still do it. But those 3 tools, I think you can pretty much wire anything in a workshop as far as flat work goes. Now, outside of that, you guys go.
I mean, when you're talking about the drill on the lathe drill, I mean, you'll be quite surprised on how powerful them hammer drills can actually be.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I actually bought from a car boot sale one time. It was a lathe that actually just clamps to your bench.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it come with a cheap Chinese set of chisels, which I used on a proper lathe once, and it nearly fired at me, but it went up instead of at me, luckily. But yeah, you just plug the drill into it, and it actually is quite powerful. So,
are there, besides those 2 that I mentioned, is there anything else that you would recommend?
I'd be inclined, because I'm just thinking, I hadn't actually thought of this until you mentioned those 3. I can remember when I was a student, the first power tools I bought were as a student, and it was in like a little case, and I think it was the cheapest I could get. Being a student, I didn't want to spend any money, let alone serious money. So there was a pack, and it was a drill, a jigsaw, and a sander, but not like a random orbit sander or a palm sander. It was one of those kind of square, like 3rd sheet, sheet, big box with a sticky out handle and a button on the side to hold it on with a trigger. Do you remember those?
I know. Yeah,
it was awful, because you'd spend about 2 hours trying to wedge this bit of sandpaper in between some spring bit of wire front and back, and then you put it on the wood, and it'd slip out and tear the paper, and within about 5 seconds, and then you spend another 2 hours trying to put a new bit of, and it cost you about £1,000 in new bits of sandpaper, which only did one like cycle of the sander. I used
one of those for years. I did.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, it's still.
Well, you can still get
somewhere. Yeah. I think
it's really?
Still somewhere. I don't use it, and I've forgotten I'd even got it. I think it's probably in my dad's shed, if I'm honest. But one of the tools I was going to say, and this might surprise people, would be a scroll saw. Now, if you want to make things for the house, like a bit of DIY and kind of do the house up a bit, then absolutely drill, sander, circular saw, jigsaw, they're your kind of DIY bread and butter tools to get your teeth stuck into. But if you want, if you're not interested in all that and you just want to kind of make things as like a craft rather than a thing to keep the other half appeased, for want of a better expression, a scroll saw is actually, and I mean Dale's just like, what? Literally in the comments, Dale's going, but what?
Did he just say that?
Am I dreaming? No, genuinely, because limited space, limited budget.
Well,
They're
we're winning,
not-
Dale. We're winning.
No, you're not. You're not. Yeah, if you want to get into that, you can do it with kids. You can do it with on a dining room table. You could probably rig it up to the household Hoover, so you don't then have to buy things. And it's a fairly cheap to get into and potentially fun project that you could do.
Like I've mentioned many times, it's the first power tool I ever owned.
Yeah,
It was a scroll saw. It's a horrible scroll saw, but yes. But I mean, I would take that to the same extent and saying, like I mentioned before, if you have a skill saw, a drill, and a jigsaw, the jigsaw can double as a scroll saw, but it's a big, bulky piece of machinery where a scroll saw will allow you to do a lot more detail work.
Yeah, I mean, a single jigsaw blade is probably bigger than the entire.
Well, you can buy very thin jigsaw blades. I mean, they're never going to be as thin as a scroll saw, but yes, I'm just saying it's doable, but you've got to be darn good at using that jigsaw if you hope to replicate the work that's done on a scroll saw. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us to the next question, because Richard, you touched on this not long ago. Which has more merit, do you think, for somebody? I'm guessing starting out is where this question is coming from Andy. Do you buy the cheap version of the tool to see if it might be of use and then upgrade later if it's useful, or do you buy the most expensive version of that tool that you can afford? And then if it's not something that you find useful or something you don't use all the time, do you then sell it on? He's asking the approach to purchasing power tools, I guess, if you're doing it for the first time. And I'll let you guys handle that one, because I have a pretty firm opinion on this, and I'm kind of a jerk about it.
I mean, I don't really care, I think, is the answer. I mean, I can see both sides of it. Buy a more expensive, more higher quality, or hopefully higher quality if it's more expensive tool, by all means. Buy a cheap one, you get a few, and if you get into it, then you've got you kind of grow out of it, so then you want the bigger. It's a bit like computers. I always remember buying a computer as a kid and going, well, I'll get that model, and wishing I'd spent an extra X money and get more, or waited and saved up a bit more and got more memory. And then you're like, but I wanted it then. I didn't want it like in 6 months' time or whatever. So there's that argument. Plus, if you get good at it, there's the kudos of, well, I can do good stuff on like Jamie. Jamie does awesome scroll saw work on a less than
£100 scroll saw.
On to the same, if not better standard than people do on a £500-600 saw. So there's a bit of kudos there. Then there's a bit of snobbery for having the expensive tool. And do you know what? It doesn't care if you buy the cheap. Yeah, you might buy twice, but you've always got the option to sell it on. It's a bit lower risk, because if you don't like it, you've only spent a fifth of what you might have spent. So at the end of the day, if it's your hobby and you can afford it, and why shouldn't you, if you want to, spend whatever you want to? That's completely up to the individual. I think there's merits to both sides of that argument.
Well, here's where I get to be a jerk on this, is only because I say this out of consideration for other people, because a lot of people are buying the best they can afford. I'm buying the most that I can right now, but a lot of people would consider that the very low end of the scale. So, I mean, my opinion on this is always buy the best you can afford, but I'm not talking about, having jam sandwiches for the week because you bought the tool. I'm talking about buying what you can realistically afford, the best that you can get, no matter what that is. And whether that's Harbor Freight or it's Festool or somewhere in between, it really doesn't matter. It's just buy what you think is the best that you can afford. And I only say this because, and it's not always in every case, because I think a lot of this determines on how often you're going to use the darn tool, because I have some really, really cheap tools in my shop, but I bought the cheap ones because I knew I wasn't going to use them that often. Okay. It's like, I only need them once or twice, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So I don't need to have the high end. I'm not going to go out on a limb and buy something that's going to cost me, $1,000 if I know I'm going to use it 3 times a year. I mean, why would I do that? I will buy a less expensive version of that. But buy the best you can at the time. And if it turns out to be a tool that you thought you were interested in, I mean, if this is an inquisitive kind of journey that we're on, and it turns out to be something that you go, you know what, I really don't like that. Well, then fine, sell it on. Then you've always got a chance to recoup at least some of what you put into it. But if you're looking to do something because you have a function that needs to be done, then ask yourself the question, okay, I absolutely need this kind of tool right now because I need to get this job done. And this is the only tool that I can think of that will make it the easiest and do it the best. Then ask the second question, how often will I use this in the future? And then buy the best tool you can with those considerations in mind. And I think that's probably the best advice I could give them. And I don't have a lot of life experience to give here other than the life I've lived myself. And so that's what I've learned. But that's you take that or leave it.
Yeah. I've been on jobs so many times where I've forgotten something. I mean, this week, the way I've been working, there's been things I've forgotten. I think, do you know what? I better take my track saw because it's really easy to make a straight cut with a track saw. You just go point A, point B, track down, saw, cut, job done. But you could also make that with a jigsaw, and you can also make that with a circular saw, and it's just a little bit more time consuming.
Yes.
And if and I look at it and I go, do you know what? Workshop's only like literally 5 minutes up the road. I could jump in the van, go and get it, and come back. And then look at it and I'm like, but I've got my circular saw here and I've got a straight edge. So it's going to take me less time to do measuring, double check my offsets, put my straight edge, clamp it, and kind of do it the way I used to do it before I got a track saw than it is to go and get it.
That's still how I do it today.
Yeah,
that's still how I do it today.
And absolutely loads of people do, and absolutely loads of people can. I mean, there's guys on site that will shoot in a door with a hand plane and a handsaw.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you've just saved a lot of money potentially. Having a track saw isn't a necessity, but the amount of straight cuts that I generally do on a job, it more than makes sense to just track down, make the cut. But sometimes you haven't got that, and I look at that. If I'm going to buy something new, and I go, do you know what? If I had that, it would be so much easier. But then I cope with the way I do it now. So do I need to? And at the point where I go, do you know what? I'm just sick of doing this every single time. Then I'll be like, yeah, I will move upgrade or whatever.
Well, let me ask you a question that isn't part of our power tool conversation today. Because
Thursday afternoon at 2.
Well, it's just because it's just because I think I've been what I think Mark Spagnolo labeled a hybrid woodworker since I started. To some extent, I mean, I am much more influenced by getting the job done using the power tool than I am using the hand tool. But I mean, if you were to start, let's say you start with the 3 tools that I mentioned, circular saw, jigsaw, drill. If you were to buy one hand tool to help with those, what tool would it be? Hand tool. I can tell you what mine would be if you want me to get started. Mine would be the first hand tool I would absolutely use would be a block plane.
Yes.
Hammer.
Okay, Jamie, that's not quite what I was looking for, but okay.
If you're making
if it doesn't fit, just beat it into submission. That's it.
There you go.
I've only got one tool, 32 different hammers.
I mean, come on. I'm serious. A block plane, I think, is probably the most useful hand tool to start with. And if that's going to be your beginning to using hand tools.
Yeah, I can see that.
For me personally, there is a little bit of coursemanship, I guess is probably the word. Customers like to see a little bit of hand finishing. Yeah, they like to see that last bit of the door being shot in with a hand plane. They
Yeah.
like to see those hand chisel work just to finish off those hinge mortises or whatever.
It makes
is.
them think quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? Yes, there is an element of making the customer feel that, it's like when you buy a new car and the guy comes out and he hand polishes it. Yeah, you know, the guy out the back has just been over there with an electric buffer and done all the legwork. He's just like, it's garnish at the end of the day.
Right.
But there is also a hugely practical side of that as well. There are jobs that, are not practical necessarily to do with a power tool. And a classic one, actually, Mark, the gentleman woodturner, has said in there, screwdriver. Yeah, removing old slotted screws from old door hinges is not practical to do with an electric drill with a straight.
No, it's not, because you'll rip the head off the bolt in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. And there are little things where you can't beat a hand tool. I mean, Carl's knocks it on the head. They're a pocket knife. I generally carry a pocket chisel, which is.
I have a pocket knife. I don't think it's the pocket knife Carl's thinking of, but yeah, mine has.
Yeah.
Mine looks a little more deathly than the one I think he's talking about, but okay. But yeah, I mean, I can see whittling down something to make it fit it correctly. But that was kind of my point with the block plane, because the block plane is a very detailed, small little tool that you just kind of chamfering or slicing down little pieces just to make things fit nicely. And so that would be my fourth addition to the 3 power tools, would be the block plane as far as a hand tool. And I don't know if you guys have a fifth one, or one that you would like instead of mine, but if you do, then chime in. But I just think the block plane works really well, because I've used it my entire life. And
I think it's very difficult to replace certain hand tools with power tools. And
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Hand planes, whether they're block planes or even large, like 4 planes or joint
or a jack plane. There's a place in the shop for a jack plane. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. Chisels, almost, but also a simple hand saw, and as Jamie said, a hammer. And, there are power hammers, and I don't mean like blacksmith's power hammers. I mean like cordless and pneumatic hammers.
Power hammers, yes.
Air hammers and whatnot. And it's difficult to replace those sorts of tools. I don't think they will ever be replaced.
No, I don't either. I mean, but they always have a hand. Like going back to the first question Andy had, there was always a hand tool precedent set before that came along. It's like for masonry work, then a power hammer is actually useful, especially if you want to start cutting brick to any certain extent. And you want to do it well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Andy touched on this, but somebody, and I forget who it was, so I apologise if it was you. Then please remind me it was you. As asked in the comments about, do you think that you have to earn the use of power tools by developing skills on hand tools first?
Oh, you know what? I almost want to agree with that, but I kind of disagree with that. And I want to agree with that, because that's how I was brought up. My father had a shop full of hand tools, and I learned those first before I learned the power tools. But I don't think that's necessarily anymore the case. I don't think that. I think that they're mutual. I think that you can learn them each at the same rate. I don't know that you need to learn one before you learn the use of the other. I think that you can use and learn them both at the same time now.
I think if you want to use hand tools and get good with hand tools, then you need to develop your skills. You can't just expect to. I mean, don't expect to be able to pick up a circular saw and say rip a sheet of plywood in half and get a really nice straight cut and
cut a straight cut out of it.
And do the same thing. That's unlikely to happen unless you do a lot of hand sawing. Then, like any skill, it's going to develop. But if you want to make things in your garage or in your garden shed, or I mean, to some extent, if you want to do your friends a favour and build them a table in your shed and then sell it on, I don't think you need to earn anything at all. If you're good at using the tools, because it's the piece that is what sets you apart, not the how you got to that piece. Does that make
Right.
sense? That's my opinion. You know,
No, I agree with you.
if you can do it quicker with hand tools, do it with hand tools. If you can do it quicker with power tools, do it with power tools. If you've only got one or the other, do it with that.
Well,
Journey's irrelevant in that sense.
Let me backpedal a little bit and say that to the extent that statement actually has some credit is that it depends on how you look at things. If you start with hand tools, you understand, and it goes back to what Andy had edged. The first question he asked was, is there not a predecessor to every power tool? Yes, there is. So if you learn the use of the predecessor, then you know the use of the tool that came after. And so if you are even somewhat familiar, and I'm not even going to say skilled, but familiar with the use of the hand tool, then that familiarity will carry over to the power tool. So I can see to some extent why it, because a lot of carpentry classes will do this to their first year students. They will. I know there's a place in Boston that I'm familiar with. I believe Kyle Toth went to it, where they were only allowed to use like hand tools for like the first year of their residency at the school. And it was only because they wanted to teach them the knowledge of using the tool, but also because they wanted them to understand the use of the power tool that was then going to replace it. And so they had a good grasp on everything. But I don't know that that is necessarily necessary. I question that. And
so here's a question for you then. So with power tools being a hell of a lot more popular and power tools getting
Sorry, Jamie, Jamie
I think we just lost him.
Oh no.
No, I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if the internet just went weird or whatever. So I'll say that again. So with power tools getting better and better over the years and all that kind of stuff, do you think hand tools are being not used as much or being faded out?
Sorry, say that again.
No, I mean, Richard, he was asking, are hand tools going by the wayside and being taken over by power tools? I don't think so, Jamie, because I think there's a place in the shop for both. I mean, that's my own personal opinion. Now, how things progress in the future, with the CNC technology and things of that nature, where things may not be needed anymore. If everybody, it really, it really depends on where everybody wants to go. If everybody goes in one direction, then yes, they're going to leave the other direction behind. But there's always going to be that middle crowd that goes, yes, that's cool, but I need that. I don't see it happening anytime soon. I honestly don't.
So
I mean, before the CNC came out, people were like, I use hand tools, but the router's cool. And now is it gonna move forward one more and say, well, I'm using the CNC, but the router's cool.
It could. I mean, that progression. I mean, who can tell? I mean, look to the history, and it will teach you the future. I mean, there are things that we use today, the hand tools that we're talking about today on the show, that have been around for thousands of years. So I don't think we're looking at their demise anytime soon. And that's just a track record that I'm going on. But who knows? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. If you do, tell me.
It's an interesting comment from Karam, actually, saying, adding to his point. Obviously, it was him that asked the original question. Does having a high level of skill with hand tools help or hinder one's skills with power tools? I think go
ahead.
So if you're really good with hand tools, like with a hand saw, say, let's pick a hand saw, would that help or hinder the use of a skill saw or a circular saw? I don't think it would make a much difference. I think they're two different skills. I
don't think the skill translates. I agree with you.
With tool for tool, I think overall, generally, if you've got that sort of hand-eye coordination, that will be a general help. But you still, I think, need to be skilled, like jigsaws. Lots of people say, "Oh, I hate the jigsaw. My jigsaw's rubbish. I'm not very good with the jigsaw." That is a tool which is a bit different. It's sort of it's a bit like a hand tool in some respects, because
You have to spend
can't-
time with it in order to get good at it.
Absolutely, and not just with jigsaws to get good with it, with that jigsaw.
Yes.
Yeah, is one. But I don't think there will ever, like I said, ever be a replacement for, say, chisel work or, certain tools.
No.
I think if you want to do power tools, I think you still need to be able to sharpen hand tools, sharpen chisels, and sharpen plane irons, and be able to use and set chisels and hand planes. Because I don't think there is a replace, even with electric hand planes.
I agree. I agree. And the simple example I would give would be a router. Unless somebody comes up with a way for a router to cut a square corner, you're going to need a chisel. Especially if you're doing like dado work where you want tightly fitted pieces, you're going to need a chisel and a hammer in order to get that corner square, because the router bit is round. Hello, and so you're trying to feed a piece of square wood into that round circle. It's going to leave a gap, and that's just not pretty. So you need to learn chisel work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that might be why, because there's sort of comments about using the hand tools as a predecessor to the power tools, and when you're taught, you start on hand tools, like you were saying,
right.
Chris. I think there's an element of kind of safety and learning, kind of baby steps, because
could be. You can. I hadn't thought about that.
You can potentially do much more damage with a power tool much quicker than you would with a hand tool. Yes, you can still cut your finger, you can still cut your hand with a hand saw and a chisel, but if you put your hand in front of a tenon saw as you're cutting, it's probably going to leave you with more finger than if you put your hand underneath a circular saw.
Oh,
do you know what I mean? They bite harder, faster, power tools. So there's that sort of, if you're a bit clumsy, it's better to be clumsy with a hand tool than it is, and kind of get comfy and less clumsy than before you start connecting up to the
and that's and like you said, that's not to say you can't injure yourself with hand tools, because I don't mind telling you, my hand has scars, and I'm not saying a lot, but 4 or 5, to where I was using a slotted screwdriver, holding a piece, trying to get this screw out of this piece of wood, and you end up pressing down really hard, and then the screwdriver slips, and right into the palm of your hand it goes. It's like, and that's an owie, and that's happened to me more than once.
I'm just wondering if there's anyone out in the chat that's cut himself with a pull saw and a scroll saw, so it's kind of a bit of both.
Oh, Jamie, you're baiting Carl. I know you are. Just stop. just leave Carl alone. Carl, we're happy to have you here with us. Don't answer that question.
Always, Carl. I sliced my finger a couple of times actually this week on a chisel, but not with the sharp bevel of the chisel, with actually the side walls. So
you're kidding.
A little 1/4-inch chisel. I'd flattened the back of it, and of course that creates a sharp side.
Sure.
Base. So as I'm holding it, I literally just like pushing it with my right hand, holding it with my left. It slips through, and it just cut my finger, and I didn't notice it until the second time, same way.
I cut this finger once, and I was making it was a jig, I believe. I was making a sliding dovetail for a jig that I was making, and because the sliding dovetail, I managed to cut it so finely, the edge of one piece of the beveled wood that I had cut it was sharp as a razor. I mean, I hit that thing with my finger, and I'm telling you, it went in at least a good 1/8 of an inch into my finger. It's like, so I mean, I'm guilty of cutting myself with wood. So yeah, it can happen.
Oh, I've done that before with wood spinning on a lathe before. I made the rim of a bowl too sharp, and as I was sanding, I come around and caught the corner of my hand.
Oh, and that hurts. That's like a mega paper cut. I mean, that really hurts.
Yeah,
you can do it with MDF as well. A freshly cut bit of MDF. You get that on that.
That's never happened to me because I hate MDF. Anyway, boys, I can't believe that hour went so quickly. We're down to the point where we need to let Jamie do his thing.
Do we have to?
No, we don't have to.
I
But
don't wanna.
I don't wanna.
but Jamie is part of us, so we have to support him. But doesn't mean we have to listen to him. So go ahead, Jamie, anytime you want.
Jamie's page.
Right. So,
He's done his-
as I mentioned earlier, our proud sponsor, Mr. Steve Nealon, was a little under the weather. Well, a lot under the weather. He had quite a big heart attack a few days ago. He's on the mend at the moment. He's got to go for a triple heart bypass on Monday. There is a GoFundMe being set up for him. So if anyone can spare a little bit of cash just to help him get him and his wife pay for some extra funds, it's going to cost quite a bit of cash by all accounts. It'll be greatly appreciated.
Triple bypass, even with insurance, is going to cost some money. And there will be a link to that down in the description on Wednesday when this comes out. So if you guys have the opportunity to support, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the chat now as well. They were talking at least, I think it's saying like $150,000 or something like that.
Well, I mean, insurance is going to cover a lot of that, but I mean, still, you look at today's world where 80% of that may be covered by insurance, and you're left with 20% of 150 grand. That's still a chunk of change. That's still a chunk of change. So
yeah.
If you can help, that'd be great.
Yeah, so if anyone could just small donation.
Isn't he? Is it? I want to say Nevada or somewhere down that way.
No, I think he's in Louisiana, something like that. Do you know? I really don't. I'm not entirely sure.
The lower.
Is that way? Yeah, he's over that way. Yeah. So, yeah. Second bit of news is obviously stickers. If anyone wants any stickers, you can go to makersinternationalpodcast.com/stickers. It will take you to a link which will take you to the website. It's a one email, one use kind of deal. So if you've ever used your email to get stickers from there before, just set up another email address and you'll get 20%, £20 off, at checkout. And you'll get your discount. So there's that. My shout out for today. My shout out goes to the guys at Easy Wood Tools and Carl Jacobson for putting on the little live event that happened yesterday or Saturday just gone for the Wednesday release. It was a hell of a show. Great day in all. I was glad to be part of it. And I also want to give a shout out to Jim Overton of Jimson Stuff, Anne Briggs from Man of All Trades, Zach Higgins from NV Woodworks, Daryl Jones of Dreadnought Woodshop, and Scott Grove from Imagine Grove for participating as well. Like I said, it was a great day all in all. So,
and Carl kicked that off and finished it, right?
Yes, he did. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So it was a great day. So they're my shout outs.
All right, links will be down in the description on Wednesday. My shout out this week goes to and it's one of those good to see your face again, brother. Shout outs this week. David Welder put out a video.
Yes.
David Welder put out a video last Monday. It's called The Finest Challenge. And this is kind of deep for if you're looking for just like a quick build project, this is not going to be for you. But it's a great message, he says, that we can look forward to on his channel. But it was just good to see his face again. David, I love you, man. I mean, David's a good man. I don't know if you guys have ever met or know David Welder. He used to be Jimmy's assistant before Brett. And Dave's just good people, man. I mean, so
he's awesome.
Give him a look if you get a chance, and then follow his channel because apparently he's going to get active again, which is great to see.
He's actually put another video out since then as well.
Has he really? Awesome.
Yeah.
I think because David's not been putting anything out or hasn't put things out for a long time, I think it doesn't appear in my feed when he does.
Yeah, the algorithm,
because it sort of like weirds out. So I didn't realize he'd put anything out. And, it's such a fast-paced environment. You kind of almost, and I hate to say it, forget about people. And as soon as somebody mentions you, like, oh yeah, cool, blimey, yeah, good, you know.
Well, David was one of those people that I first met when I first got into the community. And, he was working with Jimmy, and I had met Jimmy already because I'd gone to New York and spent time in the Jimmy shop with him for an afternoon. And then I think it was the first Atlanta woodworking show I ever went to. And we're talking like 6 years ago. And David was just one of those guys who just, open arms. Hey, brother, how are you? He was like the first guy that ever said that to me. And he was like, totally like, I was an equal. He didn't treat me like, he was this and I was this. He was like right on par with me. It was like, what a great dude. So yeah, I wanted to give him some love. Because David's good people.
Nice.
Yep.
I've literally, it's just right on my screen, so I'm going to watch that. Have you got a live premiere this week, Jamie? I know you did your.
I do, yeah. I've got a live at 11 p.m. UK time in 31 minutes.
Half an hour or so. So I might get time to watch David before watching yours. I don't have a shout out this week because
hectic week. Apparently,
I had to sleep at some point. So
2 jobs, daughter. Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, busy week. But
I'm sure it's in your watch later list.
It's not. It's literally on the screen. All I do is turn it on and hit play. It's there. It's queued up, ready to go. That's what I need to say. So yeah, all good. Do we know what we're talking about next week at all? Do we have a topic yet?
We ask this question at the end of every show, and no, I don't. But I'll be honest with you right now. I'd be tickled to have find a guest.
I'd like to get Andy Pugh on. I'd like to ask him a few questions.
I'd like to have a guest on next week. I mean, you know what? Jamie, we may need to prep for Andy Pugh, but I wouldn't mind having Andy on again relatively soon because I want to start asking him questions he has a hard time answering. He asks them to us every week, so I just think it's fair to turn the tables. Whether that happens next week or not, I mean, I don't know. We have yet to decide.
We'll have to try and work out a time for Damo as well at some point. Being in Australia.
Sure, why not?
Yes. Yeah. We'll get
Damo, work out a time.
And I'm not going to call you OG a Pivy. They can call you Damo if they want. I'm going to call you Damien. Whatever. Anyway, so no, I think we're done, Richard. I think that's good.
Good stuff.
I think our goose is cooked, and whether it was done by a power oven or a hand oven, I guess it really doesn't matter at this point. As long as it's done.
Andy Pugh's going, get Damo on. Not me, get Damo. he'll do it, he'll do it.
I don't want to answer any questions.
Oh, we're going to study for this one, Andy, trust me.
Well, I'm sure we'll work something out at some stage to at least some standard. Don't expect too much, but until next week, thank you for listening. If you are still listening, if you're not, we will say what we like about you. You all have a great week until then, so we'll say cheerio.
Have a great week, everybody.
Good night, everybody.